Has this ever happened to you? You're driving down the road somewhere familiar, and all of a sudden you see something odd. What does that say? Telluride? We're not in Telluride, that's in Colorado. This is what Telluride looks like. Wait, what is that I see? Hold on, that says Outback. This isn't the Outback. What's happening here? In doing this project, we are going to look at cars focusing on these requirements. One, the car must have been sold in the United States. It must be named after a place. There are a few coincidences where maybe it doesn't count, like the Pontiac LaCrosse, probably not named after the city, and they claim that it's named after the sport, which makes sense. The place must be specific, not something like the tundra or the savannah, which could be many places. And we are counting models and trims. I did not count any brands, such as Pontiac itself, which isn't named after the city, maybe. Let's go through the cars. Buick Riviera, named after the beautiful French Riviera in southern France. The Cadillac Cimarron, named after Cimarron, Kansas, cowboy town near Dodge City. Cadillac Eldorado, famous car named after the El Dorado region in California, which has a county and a national forest. The Cadillac Seville. This is named after Seville, Spain, another southern Mediterranean city. Chevrolet Biscayne, named after Biscayne Bay near Miami, Florida. Chevrolet Cheyenne, named after Cheyenne, Wyoming. Chevrolet Colorado, named, of course, after the state of Colorado. Chevrolet Corsica. This is named after the island, once part of Italy, now part of France, in the Mediterranean Sea. Chevrolet El Camino. This was named after a road in California that used to connect a bunch of missions along the coast, or maybe the valley. Chevrolet Kingswood. This one was maybe on the line, but there is a very old neighborhood in Bristol named Kingswood, which would have existed at the time of the car, so I believe they probably got the name from that. However, there's also, I think, a street in Detroit named Kingswood that this could have been named after as well, maybe secondarily. The Chevrolet Kodiak, named, of course, after Kodiak, Alaska, both the island and a city on that island, famously with bears. Chevrolet Laguna, named after Laguna Beach, California. Chevrolet Malibu, Malibu, California, famously home of Barbie. The Monte Carlo, which is a region inside of Monaco. This, I believe, is the first named after a racetrack, which we'll see many more examples of, including the Monza, which also has a famous raceway in the city of Italy here. The Chevrolet Scottsdale. This is one of the more random cities on the list. I'm not sure why they named the truck after this one. Part of Phoenix. Chevrolet Silverado here. Obviously a pretty famous truck. Maybe not a famous city. This is a canyon inside of California that was known for mining. The name is actually a combination of silver and the end part of Dorado, which is gold in Spanish. So it's the one that's counted as Spanglish in the languages. The Chevrolet Tahoe, big SUV named after Lake Tahoe in the surrounding area in California. And Nevada, but I counted it as California. The Chrysler Aspen, named after the ski town of Aspen, Colorado. Chrysler Cordoba, another southern Spanish city. Chrysler Fifth Ave, named after Fifth Avenue in New York. The Chrysler New Yorker, also New York, obviously. The Newport, which is named after Rhode Island. Another one falling in line with that area of mansions, high-class luxury. Chrysler Pacifica. 2 runs on this one, both kind of a van, so same kind of idea here. And this is from the town of Pacifica, California. Chrysler Saratoga, named after Saratoga, New York. Saratoga Springs is the city name. There's a county, there's a lake, a lot of stuff there. Sebring is a town in Florida with a racetrack, which is what this car is named after. The Chrysler Windsor, which is a town in Canada, right across the border from Detroit, which had a large manufacturing plant for these vehicles. Here's the other Aspen, the Dodge Aspen, named again after Colorado here. The Dodge Dakota, truck named after the Dakota region. There's 2 of them, so I just put the point in the middle here. Dodge Daytona, here's another racetrack car, named after Daytona Beach, Florida. Dodge Durango. This one I wasn't completely sure whether to count the state of Durango and city in Mexico or the city in the US. I counted the one here in the US in Colorado, but it could maybe go either way. Dodge Monaco, again another place with a racetrack, small country, also on the Mediterranean. Ferrari America, this is a wide range. I put it on the point over here, wherever Amerigo Vespucci first landed, there in Guyana, but it's half the world. Ferrari, California, named after the whole state. Another Daytona, it's one Ferrari. Daytona Beach again. Ferrari Portofino. This is the town, famously in Luca and maybe some other movies. Not many people live here, but it is a famous tourist destination. Roma, another town in Italy. However, this is the biggest city. Obviously, Rome. The Ford del Rio. This just means of the river. However, it's also a town in Texas, which was certainly around before the naming of this car. And, they surely would have known about the town if they at least Googled it. I think it counts. Granada. This is our last Spanish city on the list here. Southern region, again, of Spain. The Alhambra there in the distance. The Ford Kings Ranch model line. This is named after the largest ranch in the U.S., Kings Ranch in southern Texas. Ford Torino. This is the American version of, or the Italian version, of Turin, second biggest city in Italy. GMC Acadia, from Acadia, Maine, National Park, and a region, GMC Denali, obviously the large mountain of Denali, recently renamed in a large mess to McKinley, but it's Denali for all real purposes. GMC Sierra, named after the Sierra Mountains. GMC Sonoma, named after Sonoma, California. It's a wine country in the northern, just north of San Francisco there. GMC Yukon, after Yukon Territory or the Yukon River, Canada. Hyundai Kona, this is a town, maybe a region of Hawaii, on the Big Island. The Hyundai Santa Cruz, another Californian city. This one also on the coast, kind of in the middle of the state. Hyundai Santa Fe. Here we have a New Mexican city. Beautiful city, lots of art, cool architecture, and a car named after it. Hyundai Tucson, a city in southern Arizona. Some cactuses here. The Veracruz is another Mexican city. This one surely named after Mexico. Jeep Cherokee. There were a few that were named after Native American tribes. These I decided to count because they are, at least in my opinion, certainly tied to a region. You have counties, you have towns, you have reservations named after these places that are definitely pinpointable. So this one I put at the home base in western North Carolina here for the Cherokee Indian Reservation. Here's another one, the Comanche in Comanche County, Oklahoma. Your head base is in Lawton for the tribe. The Jeep Laredo is a model line, I believe, of the Cherokee in Texas. The Jeep Tuxedo Park here. Tuxedo Park is in New York, and it's actually where the tuxedo got its name from. Another example of a luxurious name, Kia Borrego, which is a desert area in California. There's a town called Borrego Springs, and Anza Borrego Desert State Park. Kia Sedona, named after Sedona, Arizona, with their red rocks. Kia Sorrento, this is Sorrento, Italy, which is a town in the Amalfi Coast, Italy. Here's the Kia Telluride, named after Telluride, Colorado, which the name comes from a mining mineral, I think iron-based. The Lincoln Capri, named after Capri Island town in Italy. The Lincoln Versailles, named after Versailles, France. The Palace Mazda Navajo. It's the last Indian tribe, I think, on the list here. This one is headquartered in New Mexico. Their Mercury Capri, back in Capri, Italy. The Mercury Milan, this one in Milan, also Italy. Got lots of big cities here. Mercury Montclair, in Montclair, New Jersey. Mercury Montego, Montego Bay, Jamaica. Another more resort-based idea here. Mercury Monterey, Monterey had two runs, pretty separate cars, and this is Monterey, California. There's also a Monterey, Mexico. However, that one is spelled differently with two R's, so this should be named after the one in California. The Nissan Murano, not named after Notion Marino. It's Murano, Italy, an island just outside of Venice. Plymouth Cranbrook. This one, again, is it named after the city? I'm not sure. Maybe it falls in line with the Del Rio or something. But Cranbrook is certainly a place in Canada that would have been there at the time of this car. Plymouth Cambridge, named after Cambridge, Mass., home of Harvard. Plymouth Concord, named after Concord, Mass. Again, those are both places in England as well as streets in Detroit, but I went with the Massachusetts locations. Plymouth Belvedere, after Belvedere, Illinois, where there's a manufacturing plant. The only Japanese city on the list here, the Plymouth Sapporo in Hokkaido. Plymouth Savoy, which is a region between France and Italy. The capital of the region is Chambéry here. Plymouth Bonneville, after the Bonneville Salt Flat in Utah, where there is a large salt flat that has been used to break many racing records. Pontiac Catalina, named after Catalina Island, California. Pontiac Le Mans, which is a city in France, home to a famous raceway. Pontiac, Montana, we have a van named after the state of Montana, mountains in Spanish. Pontiac Ventura, named after Ventura, California. Pontiac Aztec, which I went with Tenochtitlan, Mexico City here, home of the Aztecs of old, maybe of current. Ram Laramie, this is a trim from Laramie, Wyoming. Subaru Baja, cult classic of a car, named after Baja California, this entire peninsula. Subaru Outback, named after the Outback in Australia. Subaru Tribeca, which is a neighborhood in New York. Toyota Sequoia, named after maybe the tree, maybe the national park. Toyota Sienna, town of Siena, Italy. Toyota Tacoma, it's in Tacoma, Washington, Mount Rainier in the background there. Volkswagen Taos, after Taos, New Mexico. That concludes the list of every car sold in the US with a place name. So let's take a look into what is in the data. Here we can see California leads by a large margin with 17, over Italy, 10. Tied for third, we had Colorado, New York, and France. California and Italy have a wide variation in the types of cars. Over Colorado, we can see is mostly trucks. France is only cars. And then Florida takes third, fourth, 4 cars. And then with 3 apiece, we have Canada, New Mexico, Texas, Spain, Arizona, and Mexico. For the languages, this is based off the origin of the word the place is named after. So somewhere like Sierra Nevada would be Spanish, or Tacoma would be native. Many of these were obvious, however some of them required a little bit of research. I split English and American up. English is words that are common in English, whereas American is more standard or less standard words that are kind of made up by using somebody's name, like Daytona, which was named after a guy named Day, or Scottsdale, named after someone named Scott. But Spanish was the most popular, followed by native, and then the English and American, the Italian, the French are all also popular. Vehicle types over time shows that cars were much more popular in the past, and since about the mid 90s, other types of vehicles have become more popular. I don't think this is anything related to the brands. This is just a trend in all vehicles. And part of it is because of the station wagon and other types of cars that had the utility of vans and crossovers today. We can see that these average started in the mid to early 2000s in the car. The average one lasted from the 60s to the 80s. This is the brands over time, so we can see which ones became more or less popular. Again, I don't think this is related to the place names, but it's interesting to probably see the same data. So you can see ones that a lot of the older American ones that have died out, such as Plymouth, Pontiac, Chrysler, were popular. Mercury here as well, not as common anymore. The exception to that, probably Jeep and GMC. Those two have become more popular over time. Chevrolet is one that's just been consistently a large number the whole time. Some that have exploded on the scene recently are foreign makes like Hyundai, Kia, as well as Subaru over here. So this is the places over time, which has a few interesting trends. We can see the large shakeup in the 90s here on this graph as well, where there's certain places that are dying out and other ones that are growing. We see large growths in Colorado as well as Mexico at this point. And we see dying off of places that were maybe more where luxury cars were named after. Places like France, and this is Monaco, this is Spain, and this one, New York. Those are less common now. There's some brands that had no eligible cars. Interestingly, Audi, BMW, Acura, Mitsubishi, Infiniti, Lexus, Mazda, Mercedes, Volvo, and Saab all did not have a qualifying entry. Mostly these brands use numbers. Honda was maybe the most interesting on this list to be left out. So let's look at what is some of the new possibilities that I might predict would be possible. We'll look at what makes a good name and try to find places that could fit into the mold that you could possibly see a car named after in the future. The first one is it has to be pronounceable to the average American. We have to remember the audience here. And in all of the examples that come with foreign languages that are not English, the words are always pronounceable. There's no letters that aren't in English with accent marks or, Ny's or C's with the little thing underneath them in French or something like that. They also are not really strange or hard to read. The name has to convey an image that is going to be beneficial for this car. Usually those are going to be luxury, rugged, fun, or racing. Luxury ones like Monaco, rugged ones in the American West. Fun ones like we see some crossovers in Mexico, or the ones like resort towns or beaches in California, and racing ones, of course. All different categories of racing were represented in our list. The name should be somewhat recognizable. And lastly, the location should be desirable. Remember, this is for the Western audience, and you don't want something like super crazy or out of left field that the average person is going to have a jerk reaction to that's negative. It should be probably places that America is aligned with. So let's look at some of my predictions. First, we're going to start with Tier 1. These are the most likely ones, in my opinion, for the USA. These are places that are established locations that we've seen used before. So the same kind of regions or states that have been used in other places. These have good names. They sound nice. And they're pretty recognizable places. The first one, we're going to go with Mojave, the name of the desert in California. Missoula, Montana, another one in the western U.S. Could be good for a truck or SUV. Yakima, Washington, another western U.S. one here. A fun name and good rugged imagery. Sonora, California, that could work well. Got a couple for Florida here. I think Delray could be good. Definitely would work for a speedy little car of some sort. And Lauderdale, I think, could also work in a similar facet. Pikes Peak, I think, is so free. This is racing, and it's a mountain. This would be, I think, a great trim model for some sort of a racing truck. Similar vibe is like a Trackhawk, but if you did that to a truck, maybe. Bismarck, North Dakota, we saw multiple plains states represented, and I think Bismarck is a good name. It's the capital. Sounds good. Yosemite, I think, would work well. We saw a few national parks represented. Yosemite is maybe the most iconic of all of America's. Yuma, Arizona, another desert town. And Pocono has a racetrack, and it's a resort that people from New York go to. I think this one could be great for a car name. Got Alaska represented here with Kenai, which I think would also work well for probably a truck or an SUV. So tier 1 for some international names, more established locations. We're not going to go to any countries that we haven't seen. These are going to be good names. Again, they roll off the tongue. There's no weird letters or anything, and they're pretty recognizable places. Marbella, Spain. Again, sticking with this same area in Spain where we had 3 others, and a pretty fun name. Valencia could also work, another Mediterranean city. Majorca, I think, could work as well. A very tropical and touristy area here on the island of Majorca. Marseille, France, another one. This is in the French Riviera, I believe, or at least on the same coast, and would work for a great luxury vehicle name. Caserta sounds good. There's a giant palace here. It's in Italy, close to many others. Salerno, also near Naples, beautiful coast here. Messina, this is in Sicily, which we haven't seen, but southern Italy certainly fits the bill for a reasonable location, as well as Palermo, also on Sicily, with a name that sounds pretty cool. Tier 2 for the USA. These are going to be near established locations, so maybe we haven't seen it exactly. Still good names, and the locations may not be as recognizable. So we have Pocatello, Idaho. This is a pretty fun name, and it could be good for a car of some sort. Salida, Colorado, as well as Alamosa. These are a couple farming towns, probably pretty rugged in Colorado. Sitka, Alaska, could work on the coast down here, as well as maybe another state name that's been left off. Nevada could work. Montauk, New York, at the end of Long Island, I think could work quite well. And then let's look at Tier 2 International. These are going to be near established locations, good names, and still pretty recognizable places. I'm going to go with Tasman, Australia. I think this could work. Named after the sea, maybe after the island, but Tasman could probably have a good ring to it. Tenerife, part of these Canary Islands off the coast of Africa, but again, probably pretty touristy here, so it can work as a recognizable name. It's pretty cool. Kalahari, this is maybe more of a stretch, but it's a pretty cool name. I think most people will have heard of Kalahari Desert, and it should be recognizable enough from safaris and things. Meteora, Greece. This is the place where they have these crazy monasteries. Greece has not been used, but I think it's probably next up in line. Greece should be a fine location, especially with so many other Mediterranean countries represented. So I chose a few from there, including Santorini as well, and Mykonos. This one might be a little too much, but... And then we have Merida in Mexico, and I chose a couple to represent racing as well, with Lusail, Qatar, I think could work, as well as Sepang in Malaysia. And let's go with some wild cards. These are in places that are not established, but I think still have good names, and places could be recognizable, but also may not be. Went with a couple Brazilian cities, Curitiba and Sorocaba, I think could work. La Rioja, Argentina, I think could work. Mendoza is another wine country one, which we saw a few represented in California, so it may not be too far off. Chile, I think Temuco sounds pretty cool. Peru, I think Juliaca and Huancayo both sound pretty cool and could work for a car name. Colombia, I chose Yopal. I think this could work. It's in the jungle here. And then I chose a couple Japanese ones as well. Hokkaido, I think could work. Sendai and Saitama. Portugal, I think you could go with Nazaire, home of some of the craziest waves in surfing. And Mombasa, I think could work in Kenya. And maybe the biggest reach on this list, Juba. It's just a really fun word to say, and I think could work for some sort of a Jeep type of a vehicle.